In today's video, I'm going to show you how I am starting to work on the Hulk and Punisher big diorama from Wicked3D. And I'm printing this thing in quarter scale, so it is pretty large, as you can see. So if you're thinking about printing big, I'm going to show you a kind of a synopsis on what I do to go through all this process in order to print, prep, and paint these things. I'll break down the process of what I do, and this is only part one. This is going to be a two-part video. This thing is so big, it's going to take 2 videos to show everything. Okay everyone, so a lot of people have been asking, how big is one of these pieces that comes off the printer? Well, this is the Frozen Sonic Mega 8K. This is the old one, and I have been using this thing for a couple of years now, almost every single day, and this is what prints the big pieces. So I'm getting ready to pull a big piece off of here, which is part of the base, and let you guys see what exactly we're pulling off here, and you'll see how I print these big monstrous statues here. All right, so let's go ahead and let's get this thing off the build plate. What do you say? So you see how big this thing is. I have a lunch tray here that I use to pull all of these huge pieces out and put them on, and that way if any resin drips off or anything like that, and plus they can help catch my supports when they come off, when I pull them off and throw them away. Pull it off here. And that's the build plate right there, guys. Put this back in and take a look at that. That's how big this thing prints. And the supports just fall right off. All right, and there we have this piece of the base. I did have to print a little bit on this side here, which I normally don't do, but it is flat the way I printed it at an angle. And then on this side here, as you can see, it's smooth. On that side, it's smooth. I can tell I'm gonna have to pop that out right there. But other than that, turned out really good. What do you think? So the next thing that I do once I get all of these pieces printed, or as I go along, the next process is to put them in a wash tub that I made just out of a big plastic tub or whatever like that, to clean and let them set for 24 hours. That way it gets all of the dried out, or all the resin and everything, all the alcohol dries on it. And then before I cure it, I actually cure and bake the print itself. That way it cures from the inside out too. And then after that, I start putting pieces together and start doing the mudding up or puttying and filling up seams and cracks, and then, you know, sanding and all that stuff. But this is kind of like the homemade tub that I got, because these are simply too big for some of your commercial wash stations. So here is just, this is my wash tub, and essentially it's just a shallow wash tub filled up with denatured alcohol, and I have a couple of pieces over here ready to be cleaned, and I will go ahead and dip them into this, wash them off real good. I use like a little toothbrush to agitate everything, any excess resin come off of the prints. And then I set them on a new tray with some paper towels underneath them, and let that residual alcohol or whatever like that come off. And then I let them sit for about 24 hours before I do any curing. That way I get every single little bit of resin off, the alcohol fully dries, and it's good to go. Nothing's going to leak out. So what do I use to clean it? I use denatured alcohol, just like this. So this is what I use to clean my prints. It dries very efficiently. It cleans it off very nicely, and it actually leaves no sticky residue or type of finish on the model itself. And I've been using this for several years. I can get this readily at the hardware store, Lowe's, or some Walmarts carry it for, I think it's around $20 for a gallon. While it may be a little expensive compared to some other stuff, this stuff stays relatively clean and you can use it for a very long time. Alright, so now once 24 hours has passed and I'm ready to cure the prints, I go about it one of two ways. Either I have my own homemade tub that has a big light over it, and I've shown that in several of my videos before, that I clean large pieces with, or I use this. So this is one of the stations that I use here. This is the Hay Gears cure station here. It's really, really nice, very expensive. I think this thing runs around like $700, $750, but this is fairly large, enough to accommodate a lot of prints, and it actually will bake and cure at the same time, and it gets them really cured. I mean, there's like some stations that you get there are some stations that you get that don't fully cure. It takes a while, but I bake them in here, cure it for a total of 6 minutes, and if it's two-sided, I'll just flip it over and cure it for another 6 minutes, and by that time it is fully cured. The other thing that I use, and I have to set this on the floor because it's so big, is the uniformation cure station. This is, I think, the newest one that they have, and this thing is humongous. Allows you to fully cure a print in here. I usually, it does the baking and all that stuff too, but again, I cure it on side for 6 minutes and flip it over for maybe another 6 minutes, and it does fully cure throughout. Now, I did hear of issues with the smaller one, that it didn't cure the prints all the way through, but rest assured this one here does. As you can see, it's pretty big. You can fit, pretty much whatever in there you want. Sometimes it doesn't always fit perfectly, but it does the trick. It's got a couple of exhaust fans in there, and the lights are definitely efficient enough to cure. So those are a couple of the things that you have to have in order to print big models. Now, I'm not saying run out and purchase the largest printer there is just so you can fit stuff on the build plate, because there are programs that you can get like Lubin and Mesh Mixer to help chop up some of the prints and make them smaller for smaller printers. But ultimately, you're going to want to print big as you can in order to not have so many seam lines and everything like that. In order to print a piece like this big, you got to have a decent sized printer. So the other thing you might want to take into consideration when printing a big model is the resin cost. Now we're talking some serious numbers depending on the resin that you get. So I try to use the cheapest that I can buy, which is usually Sunlu resin or Resin 1. So that's why I made the video on performance settings that I use. I made a couple of those videos, matter of fact. That is why I use the settings that I do to help cut down the cost of resin. So I don't always have to print very thick or whatever, and a lot of supports. And these settings that I actually have in the video that I did will actually show you how to cut down on that. So the other thing that I see a lot of people do also is they leave their supports on whenever they clean the print. I don't do that. So if you take them off ahead of time, it's actually going to save you money in IPA or denatured alcohol, whichever. And I'll explain to you why. And if you had all the supports on here and you put it in the alcohol, it's going to dirty up your alcohol a lot faster than it would if those were off here. So keep that in mind. Okay, so here is Punisher, and I pulled them all together, put him together, glued him together and everything, and I really wanted to do this as one solid character. The only thing that I really have to concern myself with is the skull, which is going to be painted white. The rest of it is going to be pretty much a black or some dark color. and that's going to be pretty easy to do. On the Hulk is going to be a little different. So I'm not attaching the head sculpt yet because I'll paint that separately. But other than that, I'm getting ready to slap some black primer on this, and we'll see how it looks. I've done all the prep work as far as the sanding, getting all the supports, stumps and stuff off of it, and making it look good and fitting it together. I did have a little bit of a problem fitting the gun on here. I had to actually sand that right there a little bit more, and had a little bit of a problem on the Hulk too. So let's take a look at the Hulk, and I'll show you where I ran into a problem. Alright, so Hulk is one big beefy boy here, and I've got him all put together. You can see how big he is. Where I ran into a problem was I upscaled everything 150% on the torso, the head, the arms, the legs, everything. And what I found out was the sizing wasn't correct. So the arms actually come out a little bit bigger, probably about 2 to 3% bigger than the normal 150%. So I have to go back in, sand some of this down, fill it up, and make it to where it'll fit. You can see the gaps here. Make it to where it'll fit correctly. But I'm trying to pull this camera back all the way so you can really see how big this thing is. But it is... it's all together. I've glued it, got to prep it and everything. The legs, what happened here was I had to, let me set that down. So the legs I got all glued together, and as you can see, it wasn't very cut very well. So I got to prep all that, fill it, and I really wish they did their cuts a little bit different. So there's a little prep work involved in that, and the seam lines. I had to actually cut the keys out because of the way that the torso fits onto the legs, because of the size difference. Again, I guess the torso actually printed up smaller than 150% in the head as well, because everything else is sized correctly. So I've reached out to the guys from Wicked to let them know about that, and maybe they can fix it for future people. I don't know. But yeah, this thing is going to be pretty big. It's almost going to be as big as my Juggernaut, probably a little bit bigger than this one here that I've yet to finish, the Juggernaut versus Colossus. But it's going to be a pretty good size as well. But Hulk is going to be put together here soon, once I prep all the legs and fill all the gaps, and then we'll start on primer on him and get him all together, and hopefully ready soon. And the base is going to consist of like 8 sections like this that I have to put together, fix the seams, and primer and prep and paint or whatever. And I'm not gonna do the bottom base. It was just basically looks like just something simple. I kind of like it without that little finish on there. So I'm gonna look and see about this. This piece right here took about 18 hours to print, and it's pretty heavy. I did print it in a 2.2 millimeter thickness, and the other pieces, I've got some that have actually come off the printer that I still have to clean and cure. And here are a couple more of the pieces. These are a couple of the large ones that I've actually had to print on the Frozen Sonic Mega AK. Again, I got another one going right now in the printer below me, but there's 8 sections all together. So once I get all those to fitted, prepped and everything, it's going to be just as big of the base like my Juggernaut versus Colossus. It's going to be a colossal size print. Alright, so here is Punisher all primed up in black, and I did print out this piece of the base right here so we could have something to stand on. That way I could go ahead and kind of get a feel for everything and paint him up. But I wanted to go ahead and get everything glued together. I'm going to paint this as a solid figure here. Now, one thing that I do use is, I can tell you I do not use any super glue on this. Super glue is not going to hold this big piece of a model here. So I'm using this BSI 2-part epoxy here. I use this on all my models. It's so strong, it keeps everything together, and you don't have to worry about it. It's actually resin with a hardener, essentially. But this is going to take place of the super glue, because super glue is not going to hold that thing up over a long period of time. The other thing that I did was I noticed on this right here, if I want to take this on and off, I'm going to have to probably put in a peg onto the bottom here of the feet, so that way they actually fit down inside there, because this figure is not going to stand on here by itself without any support, because it's just so heavy that, like, if I take my hand off of it, it just leans. So I don't want it to drop, and this big of a piece, I don't want to glue it onto the base. So take that into consideration whenever you're doing a model, period, no matter how big or how small it is. If the key's not deep enough, then you're probably going to have to do some sort of peg onto there, like some type of metal dowel or a wooden dowel. I prefer metal, but that way the thing will sink down into there and stabilize it, and it won't fall over. Now, as far as primer, I use this, just a Krylon Color Max primer. I use the black and the gray. White is terrible. It runs on you, and it's very, very watery. So I use this on most of my models. If I don't use this, then I'm using the Vallejo airbrush primer that I can get pretty much anywhere. But this is so convenient for me to use. Now, Punisher's head, you printed this with some water washable resin. I was very impressed with this stuff. It's very well detailed, very good textures, and that resin held up really good, and it worked on my normal settings that I use on my printer. So this is the Resin One Water Fairy that they sent me, and tried testing it out a while back, and I just have really good results out of it. So this may be something in the consideration, and I'll have a link below in the description. So with the head, I'm keeping it separate because I'm obviously going to paint this one separately from the body itself, and it's just kind of stand up there right now. If it stands, it just won't sit up there right. But anyway, you can kind of see how it's going to be. It's a still impressive model, as tall as it is. But I mean, even as tall as he is, the Hulk is like twice as big. Oh man, I have no idea where I'm going to put this. So I know I showed it maybe in a couple of older videos, but this is what I do most of my prep work with. This little rotary tool here, it was like 20 bucks on Amazon, and I'm not sure if I have a link or not, but there's like 3 different speeds on it, and it comes with a multitude of different bits and everything. But this bit right here is what I use to kind of grind some of those little stumps off, and where I don't dig into the detail too much by using sandpaper. But this allows me just to kind of go in on a detail basis and get that stuff smoothed out really good. But without this, I think I would be lost. And for gap filling, I'm going to be using these 2 things here, this plastic wood filler and this Fun Creek Hole light curing putty. I know Frozen makes some as well that's supposed to be pretty good, and a little bit cheaper in price. This stuff is kind of expensive, but these guys sent me a whole ton of it, so I'm going to use it. As far as the plastic wood filler, you can find this anywhere, like at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. Very good, easy cleanup, very good filler for light cracks and stuff. You just don't want to use any huge gaps or anything. And also I'll use some Avengers Epoxy and I'll even use some Avengers Epoxy to clean up those large gaps as well. Okay, now let's talk about Hulk here. So Hulk had to glue the head on here because it's just a nasty seam line that I'm going to have to fill. I know Wicked had 2 different head sculpts for this, but I'm going to use this one here because it's more close to the cover of the original book itself, and I didn't like the other head too much. Now with this one here, because of the size difference, and I was not about to reprint these arms here. Each arm took 24 hours to print, in case you wanted to know, and I printed them in a 2 millimeter thickness, and I did the same thing with the torso. The head I printed in a 1.8 thickness, and I didn't have to do much prep work on this, on the head itself. But again, those nasty seam lines right here to where it connects to the body, Sorry for my shoddy camera work, but I'm trying to hold this and hold the camera. But those little seam lines right there, I'm going to have to fill those up. Another reason why I'm doing this as a whole piece. But with this right here, I'm going to take some Aves epoxy and go in and fill these gaps here and sand that down to where it'll even out, to where it looks like just one piece. The back is more noticeable than anything. I've got, I mean, I'm having to hold him right here, but the back is more noticeable than anything. With the gap right there, I'm going to have to, again, fill that, smooth it out. Same thing over here, and make it one piece. I really wasn't impressed with the gaps and stuff and with the way they cut this, but I'll make it work. Love you guys, Gabriel and everybody over there. You guys do an amazing job. I'm just nagging a little bit about the seam work on this one here, because this thing is so damn big. But yeah, I used the BSI glue for this. Can you imagine trying to use super glue to put this thing together and keep it together? It would break off in a heartbeat. So the next thing I'm going to do with Hulk is I'm going to go ahead and fill those seams, start the sanding process once it dries, and then we're going to get this into some gray primer. And I'm still wondering if I should paint it gray or green. I think I'm going to go with the green to keep it, again, close to the original cover of the book. Okay, everyone, so that is pretty much the print and prep process. Now, what I have to do next is I have to basically putty everything up, sand everything down, primer it, and get it ready for paint. And that's what we're going to show the results of the primer section and everything on the next video. And then I'm actually going to start on the paint process. We're going to do the two figures first, and then we're going to move on to the base. You're going to see how big this thing really is. But this is what I do. I mean, I like to print big quarter scale statues. It's not for everybody, but if you're thinking about doing something in a large scale, maybe this will help you out. And as always, everybody, stay safe out there. Get out and create something. Print, prep, paint, repeat. And until the next video, don't forget to check out part 2 coming up very soon. We'll see you.